far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment, it's your time. You stood tall and now you see, standing in your destiny. 100 women growing strong. 100 women where you belong. You stood tall and now you see, you have reached your destiny. Woman, woman.
As people of African descent, we offer this land recognition in solidarity with the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island in the efforts and deliberate intentions toward decolonization. As people of African descent, we acknowledge the land of Turtle Island that sustains us, express deep gratitude to its indigenous peoples, and pledge to honor our dignity and divinity that ultimately connects us all. By Kay Johnson. Welcome to 100 ABC Fireside Chats. 100 Accomplished Black Canadian Women is a bold project initiated by co-authors and co-founders, the Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine, Dr. Denise O'Neill Green, and Donna Jones Simmons. Our mission is to celebrate and archive the professional accomplishments of trailblazing Black women from all across Canada. The goal is to create an ever-expanding database available for current and future generations via print media, public and private libraries, as well as our website, which is www.100abcwomen.ca. In addition to our fireside chats on topics that matter to our communities, such as education, healthcare, entertainment, creative arts, trade union, and so much more, we offer biennial book launching galas and biannual symposiums. The co-authors and co-founders would like to take this opportunity to thank each of you for attending today's fireside chat. We know that you will find these sessions educational and inspirational. So sit back, relax, and hear from our brilliant and talented honorees.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Beyond the Surface. I'm Nancy Sims and the moderator for today's session. Happy Black History Month 365, and for those of us in Ontario, Happy Family Day. A special thanks to Malcolm Edwards and Donna Jones Simmons for organizing these amazing fireside chats. So thank you. Thank you again for logging in and for your interest and commitment to advancing health equity. Your presence here matters. You still have a few minutes to send the link to a friend or colleague, sister, or community member who might benefit from this conversation. Whether you're driving, on a treadmill, preparing dinner, or relaxing at home, I invite you to settle in, take a breath, and join us as we continue to reimagine and co-create a world where all Black women flourish physically, psychologically, financially, and spiritually. Again, thank you for being here. When we talk about Black women, one of the first words many people use is strength. Strong enough to hold families together, strong enough to build communities, strong enough to lead movements and organizations, strong enough to remake ourselves each and every day. And yes, all of that is powerful and all of that is true. But today, our amazing and brilliant panelists invite us to reflect more deeply. They challenge us to think critically about how Black women are positioned in the world and how that positioning affects our health and well-being. They also share practical insights on how we can better care for ourselves. They underscore something essential. Strength should not require suffering. Resilience should not come at the expense of wellness. Today, our panelists help shift the narrative from survival to holistic health, from endurance to empowered wellness. They remind us that Black women's health is not just about one single diagnosis or isolated issue. It encompasses the whole woman, our bodies, our minds, our finances, and our spirit. Black women's wellness is not only a personal responsibility, it is a collective responsibility. And it is in that spirit of collective care and shared accountability that we move into the heart of today's conversation. It is now my pleasure to introduce our incredible panelists. I will begin by sharing a brief bio of each of them. Following the introductions, I will pose questions to each panelist, guiding our discussion over the next hour or so. We will then close with final reflections. Let's begin. So I have the absolute privilege of introducing Roheen Bohajroom. And Roheen is an award-winning educator, leadership coach, and global speaker who motivates future leaders to create meaningful change and inspires women of color to turn inner work into breaking cycles, brave action, and real-world impact. Rooted in her Zimbabwean Canadian identity and 20 plus years of leadership in higher education, she drives systemic change and shares her expertise on global stages in her national column, The Many Faces, and on her podcast, Unspeakable Leadership, to amplify racialized leaders and redefine what powerful leadership looks like. Next is Patrice Dupiza. She identifies as an innovative and solution-focused professional dedicated to reducing health disparities in equity-deserving communities. As both a registered occupational therapist and a naturopathic doctor, Patrice has worked with diverse clients in clinical and leadership roles in Canada and the USA. As a clinician, Patrice's work focuses on cancer rehabilitation, and she maintains a small private practice in Toronto. Next, a woman who needs very little introduction for those of us here in the GTA, and who has been at the front end of challenging patriarchal and racist systems for decades, Jacqueline Ben-John. Dr. Ben-John is an African Black diasporic cisgender woman, mother survivor, immigrant consultant, and community engaged educator. She is a distinguished community leader and scholar committed to advancing social justice and Black feminist pedagogies. A trailblazer against sexual and gender-based violence, her activism has deepened understandings of race, gender, and resistance in the lives of trauma survivors. Jacqueline serves as executive director of the Women's Support Network of York Region. She's also a sessional lecturer at the University of Toronto and a professor at Humber Polytechnic. Next, Altia Kador. And Altia is a physiotherapist, clinical supervisor, and wellness visionary who organized the first multidisciplinary wellness hub for entrepreneurs and practitioners. As the founder of Minds Like Consulting and Community Practice Incorporation, she creates healing spaces that center emotional regulation, self-mastery, and community empowerment. Her work bridges mental health, entrepreneurship, and leadership, ensuring that Black and Indigenous communities thrive with intention and strength. And next, Dr. Barb Hamilton Hinch is a full professor in the Faculty of Health and the Assistant Vice Provost of Equity and Inclusion at Dalhousie University. She's from the historical African Nova Scotian communities of Beachville and Cherrybrook in Nova Scotia. Barb's research examines the impact of structural, systemic, and institutional racism on the health and well-being of people of African descent. Thank you all. Are you ready? Yes, my people, we have 5 brilliant women at whose feet we will sit for the next hour or so and learn. The first question will go to Roheen. Roheen, you have led through high-stakes systems that were not built with you in mind. What wellness practices have actually helped you stay steady and effective, especially when the pressure is political, emotional, and constant?
Thank you so much, Dr. Sims, for that incredible opening and warm introduction. And many thanks to my sisters who are here in community and in sacred space as well. You know, when I think of this question, I'm so grateful that we start with self, with the I, because I think many of the systems that we lead in or that we work in require us to think of everyone else but ourselves. And so I'm very grateful that we begin from the I. For me, wellness is strategic. And I say this because I've led in systems where I've sometimes been treated as both the solution and the problem. And I think for many of us as Black women, we can relate to this, where all of a sudden that identity that you have and that you bring is both a strength and then also seen as a weapon. And so I've built wellness practices that have anchored me, regardless of the noise or what happens in the rooms that I'm in. And so I'm going to offer 3 practices that I hope those who are listening might be able to put into practice for themselves. The first is I've developed a very strong relationship with my body and, more importantly, my nervous system. I ask deeper and bigger questions like, am I bracing? Am I ready for this? Am I holding my breath? Especially before I'm just about to go into a big meeting or work on a specific task. And the reason I do this is because I need to check in with whether or not I need to regulate myself. How many of us have gone from back-to-back meetings, or we're moving from one place to another, and we're not taking that time to pause, to check in with ourselves? And so I've made that an intentional practice, and it can be as simple as breathing, grounding yourself with your feet on the ground, or taking a short walk. Often we are put in places where we're not checking in. And if our bodies think that we're in danger, our leadership can't be in that place of wisdom. The second is that I protect my clarity with boundaries. Now, I have to admit, I am a recovering people pleaser. I have learned from my grandmothers, from my mothers, from my aunts that, you know what, you do everything for anyone, even if it's at the expense of yourself. And so it's been a healing journey to recognize that I can have boundaries. I can put those in place. And this has been an area that is still a work in progress for me. And so what this looks like and how this shows up for me is that I don't take meetings with no agenda. I'm not going to be called into something and spend an hour lofting through ideas. I don't process heavy things alone. I have good people that can help me do that. And I don't answer emotionally loaded emails when I'm in that moment. When we start to practice those boundaries, even if they're as simple things as those, or for some people that might not be simple, we can start to extend our boundaries beyond some of the tasks or what is asked of us by our family members, our communities. Because when we create boundaries, we create that clarity. And the third is I practice what I call my dignity maintenance. And let me tell you a little bit about what I mean by that. I choose at least one action a day that is going to remind me that I am not powerless. Because again, systems that we sometimes work in give us this impression that we don't hold the power, or that we have to rely on a title, a hierarchy, an organizational chart to give us that power. But I know I have power with it. So that sometimes shows up in having a difficult conversation, saying what I mean, and also meaning what I say. When I am able to practice my own dignity and not externalize that and wait for somebody else to give that to me, it actually reconnects me with a deeper place of knowing that as much as I can't control everything, I can control some things. So for all of us, as we think and we start to consider wellness and well-being, I'll leave you with this question, a question that I believe will transcend and translate every experience. And that question is, what do I need to do to stay grounded in myself while I am in this room? When we start to ask ourselves that question over and over again, we begin to realize we have far more answers than what the system tells us
Thank you
we
so
don't
much.
have.
Thank you so very much, Rohan. And you know, your responses feed very nicely into our next question that's directed to Alethea. And so, Alethea, what does wellness beyond the surface truly mean in the context of mental health?
Thanks, Dr. Sims, for that amazing question. And it's such a pleasure to be on this panel with some amazing leaders. And if we look at what wellness beyond the surface actually means, I'd like to take you on a little journey of visualization. And picture an iceberg, and we're floating along in our boat. We're taking a ship, and we come across something that looks great on the surface right in front of us that we could see. And what we can see when it comes to Black women is that they are juggling multiple roles, whether it's from home as a caregiver, you're in the workplace, especially if you're intertwined with leadership. You may also be someone that is juggling multiple positions at one point, or you are a community leader and your activism has really taken off and you are in the forefront of some major decision making. All of these roles are things that we carry. And when we are carrying these things, we are also carrying responsibilities. And like Rohini had said, all of these responsibilities that we are holding and carrying, it carries and holds a lot of weight. So by the time we are realized that we are faced with a lot of responsibilities, which makes us overwhelmed, anxious, and maybe sometimes depressed, we tend to collide when we get to the surface and not realizing that all of these things that we have accumulated along the way, days, weeks, and months, have um, you know, gathered and festered in us, inside of us. And if we do not have a place where we can extinguish and release some of that energy, it weighs us down. So when we are looking at things, I'm not looking at just you going to the spa and getting your hair and nails done. That is fantastic. But again, that's just on the surface. I want to know what's going on with you and your life personally in terms of the trauma that you carry, the responsibilities and the secrets that you hold for your family, and all of the other things that you may absorb along the way when you're at work, when you're engaging with other people, even when you're interacting in a store. That is all energy that we hold as women because we are just naturally givers and holders of things. And all I am asking for women to do is to release some of that responsibility, release some of those things that we hold on to, and get rid of that cape for a minute and start to ask yourself, if I am not in these multiple roles, who am I as a person? And
Thank you so
every
very much, Althea. I'm going to go straight on to Jacqueline. And so, Jacqueline, when we move beyond Western clinical definitions, what does true wellness look like for marginalized trauma survivors? Or what are the best practices for supporting survivors' self-care and sustainable well-being? Maybe you could just link them together. So, what does it look like? And maybe any tips that you can offer us.
Yeah, thank you so much for your kind introduction earlier, Nancy. I am humbled to be here among such esteemed colleagues and honored to be a forthcoming 100 Accomplished Black Canadian Women honoree. So, very excited about that. Thank you. So, in the context of trauma survivors, we must acknowledge the prevalence and impacts of victimization. That's very important. So, for example, Stats Canada reports that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 8 men experience sexual assault since age 15. Indigenous, Black, Two-Spirit, LGBTQIA plus survivors face higher risk, and 95% of assaults are not reported to the police for fear of dealing with the police, not being believed, blamed, re-traumatized, many reasons. But these realities result in many survivors not seeking legal redress, medical care, or receiving formal mental health diagnosis or community supports. Therefore, moving beyond Western clinical definitions is key to ensuring that understanding wellness as wholeness is not symptom reduction, and it calls for an awareness that healing is not just the absence of anxiety or depression. Wellness as wholeness includes a focus on the multiple dimensions of survivors, such as their emotional, their spiritual, their relational, sexual, and embodied well-being. So as Dr. Njoki Wayne emphasizes in her work of Afrocentric approaches to wellness, healing is inseparable from culture, from spirituality, and community. In fact, wellness goes far beyond appearance and quick fixes, particularly when some survivors experience what we call invisible healing journeys. Survivors appear functional while living with sleep disruption and self-blame or anxiety. True wellness allows space to recognize that healing is a journey, and it's complex and it's messy, with a continuum of emotions, thoughts and actions such as grief or anger. True wellness is surviving, it's thriving, and it's choosing yourself with intention and kindness. Wellness must also include cultural and ancestral dimensions. Both African and Indigenous perspectives emphasize connection, connection to land, connection to nature, connection to spirit. Connection fosters sustainable wellness and learning to live in harmony with yourself and living with other things. So, wellness should also be recognized as self-defined and self-paced healing. By rejecting these rigid timelines or, productivity-based measures of recovery, survivors can focus on true healing, defining what healing means to them, and going at their own pace, reclaiming safety in one's body, setting boundaries, surviving triggers, rebuilding trust in relationships, or feeling culturally and spiritually rooted and experiencing moments of peace and agency and love, the capacity to love self, but also to love others. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. And so, Patrice, your question really captures a lot that has been said earlier, and it is, if your clients are struggling to pour into themselves due to limited time, energy, or resources, what do you suggest as a starting point for them to engage in self-care practices to improve their overall well-being?
Thanks for the question, Dr. Sims. And I really want to take a moment just to thank the panelists and the organizers just for the opportunity to be a part of such an esteemed panel. So to answer your question, I tell my clients to start small. Research shows that building daily habits incrementally is the best approach so that they don't really feel overwhelming. And that's also the key to sustaining these habits long term. Sources vary, but at minimum, they say it takes at least 3 weeks to form a habit of consistent practice to form a habit, although I've seen that vary to as long as a few months. And definitely, I'd argue that it's really a bit on the longer side to truly embed these things into your lifestyle and your daily routine. So if I give you an example, if let's say your goal is to wake up an hour earlier to exercise or meditate or prayer first thing in the morning, the way that some people would think about going about that would be to set their alarm clock an hour earlier from day one. What I would encourage you to do is actually set it 1 minute earlier every day for the next 2 months, because then your body doesn't actually feel that adjustment. It might seem like, why bother? What difference is 1 minute going to make? But this really incremental change is the key to success. So oftentimes, if you think of New Year's resolutions, all the stats show how many people fall off by mid-January, and then it affects their confidence in achieving their goals. So really, if you set something so that the level of change is so incremental that it's almost impossible for you to fail, then that will actually set you up for success long term. Another example, let's say somebody wants to increase their physical activity. They could start by climbing stairs. So on day 1, they would climb 1 extra stair than whatever their baseline is. Day 2, they would do 2 stairs. Day 3, 3 stairs, and continue that way. So over the course of, again, a month or 2, they would have conditioned their body to go up 3 to 4 flights of stairs. Most flights have 13 to 16 steps in a flight, right? So these incremental changes set people up for success in ways that they don't even realize that really kind of change their lifestyle without them feeling the impact of making a dramatic change. I will say that in working with my clients, I do encourage them to set SMART goals, which is the first step. And for those that are not familiar with the acronym SMART, the S is specific, the M is measurable, the A is either attainable or achievable, the R is realistic, and the 5 is time bound. Sorry, the T is time bound, right? So using that SMART acronym to really set out what your goal is, it gives you a starting point of how to achieve it. And then you need to set regular time aside, whether it's weekly, to reflect on your progress. And if the goal is too lofty or it's not challenging enough, that's when you make the adjustments, because you have to start somewhere, and giving yourself something concrete and tangible to work towards really helps to support your outcome long term. Thanks.
Thank you so very much. Our final question for round one goes to Barb. As a full professor and AVP of Equity and Inclusion, what are some of the key challenges you help to navigate related to trauma and resilience?
Thank you for that question, Dr. Sims. And I also want to acknowledge this amazing panelist that we're a part of. And I want to thank all my sisters who nominated me. And this is also, I'm one of the honorees for 2026 and very honored to have been nominated and looking forward to meeting so many people in September. In response to your question, I mean, I think about the fact that there's still so few of us, both African Nova Scotian within Canada, that are in the academy as full professors or as professors in senior leadership positions. And many of us suffer from the imposter syndrome, believing that, I can't be or I am not this, and having to, we push ourselves to overachieve when we are just enough. And we sometimes need to recognize that what we're doing is enough. And I think that's one of the challenges in working with some of my colleagues and that are my sisters are in the academy, is understanding that what we bring to the table is enough. I also think there's also the challenge of mentorship. We're not sure as Black women who we can trust, who has our back when it comes to looking at opportunities to advance in the academy, both within our own institution, nationally or internationally, and trying to find better ways to collaborate. So I encourage my colleagues and my friends and my teams to not only collaborate within your institution, but to collaborate nationally and internationally and build that sisterhood outside of your own university. And I've been very fortunate to be able to do that because sometimes in our own universities, and I'm sure some of my sisters experience this who are in the academy, you may be the only one still in your faculty, even in 2026. And so trying to find someone to collaborate on in relation to Black health, Black resilience, Black trauma, we often have to go outside that circle. And I'll take a page of the book of my sister Rohini in terms of being able to say no. And how can we say no and still maintain our independence and our relevancy? Sometimes when we're early in our career, we're afraid to say no. And we know that many of us who are Black women and part of the equity deserving group, we're often asked to sit on committees that don't even reflect what we do academically. But because we identify as a Black woman, they put us there. So we need to learn that language of saying, no, I was hired because of, and this is the lane that I want to stay in, the work that I want to do. So it's helping each other to find our voice, to be strong in what we believe and what we say, and making that connection outside of our own institution so that we grow nationally and internationally as sisters. And I've been able to do that through a number of sisterhoods that our own Dr. Dolores Mullings helped to start for those of us who are in senior leadership positions. And I thank her for starting that collaboration of sisters. So those are some ways that I support my sisters and challenges in the academy of moving forward and maintaining their independence as well. And rest is resilience. I think everyone needs to have that book. If we want to do more, we need to also take care of our own health, which was what we're all saying within this theme. So thank you for that question.
Thank you so very much. So, I'm sure those of you who are listening and seeing us will understand that, as Black women, we are not a homogeneous group. And so there's a wide array of responses that you got. And I hope you're taking notes because I am. This is so rich and engaging. As we enter our second set of questions, again, I'm reminding each of the panelists to be succinct You have roughly 3 minutes for each question so that we can get to the end of this session in a fulsome way. So the first question goes to Roheen. A lot of leaders talk about resilience, but resilience can become code for keep enduring harm. How do you tell the difference between healthy resilience and harmful self-abandonment? And what do you do when you notice you've crossed that line?
Thank you so much, Nancy, for that question. And I love this question because the truth is some people will praise your resilience because it's convenient for them. And I think of what Barb just shared earlier in terms of when you're one of few or one of only, that level of resilience and taking on more and more, and the strength that Nancy, you mentioned at the beginning, is often what is indicative of being the only Black woman, particularly in leadership spaces. So for me, healthy resilience is where your dignity is still maintained, restored, sustained, supported. Harmful resilience is when you're surviving at the cost of yourself. When you are finding that you have sleepless nights, you're finding that you're struggling with insomnia, you're irritable, and you're probably experiencing the symptoms of burnout. As somebody who has experienced 3 cycles of burnout, it really wasn't until the 3rd cycle of burnout that I recognized I needed to do something different. And I encourage each and every one of us, when we think about those either close encounters to burnout or realizing that your ability to endure more is being taken for granted, there's 2 things I want you to do. The first one is I really want you to pay attention to what is happening in your body. Our bodies carry so much wisdom, and Alethea shared that with us at the beginning by taking us through this beautiful visual. The realization that we're carrying so much, both ancestral, generational, but also presence as well. So tune in to what's happening in your body. And then the second thing is, as soon as you realize that those are things that you may not, they don't resonate with you anymore, or they're not the kind of signals that you want to be involved in or expressing, seek support and seek help. Because the moment you notice that you've crossed that boundary and it's a threshold that you cannot sustain, is the moment when you might need to seek the advice of incredible physicians like Patrice or others to be able to find a different and a better trajectory for each and every one of us. I leave you with one question, and that is, whenever you're in a position where you are questioning, is this it? Is this everything that I'm meant to be doing and being? May you add also the question, is this making me more of me, or is it making me less of me? Because we deserve to be our true selves, and no environment and no system should ever take that away from us. Thank you.
Thank you, Roheen. I think your answer transitions perfectly into the next question, and it's for Jacqueline. How can we be intentional about promoting well-being, safety, and stabilization for survivors navigating multiple layers of systemic oppression?
Thank you. I love this question. Well, we can start by reframing self-care. As you know, it's often commercialized, but also individualized. So for survivors, self-care is not indulgence, it is survival. And as stated by Bell Hooks, healing is an act of justice. However, for many marginalized survivors, their bodies and well-being are routinely devalued. Reframing self-care makes space for deeper understandings, which include rest, boundaries, safety, emotional regulation, and saying no without guilt. We can begin recognizing that self-care for survivors is far more than a spa day. It's creating safety in a world that disrupted it. It is reclamation. We also must ground our understanding and the promotion of well-being and safety and stabilization for survivors in a Canadian reality. And what I mean by that is it's important to understand that survivors are navigating multiple systems while they are trying to implement all of what my colleagues have been speaking about. That fundamental truth says sexual trauma has long-term impacts on both mental and physical health. Public Health Agency of Canada also links it to substance use, chronic health conditions, for example. And at the same time, Black, Indigenous, and other racialized survivors are also navigating poverty. They're navigating housing and food insecurity and transphobia, which means healing does not occur in a vacuum. It unfolds within structural and systemic realities. So promoting well-being, safety, and stabilization through a lens grounded in Canadian realities does two critical things. One, it validates survivors' lived experience within broader systemic contexts. And two, it underscores the urgent need for sustainable, culturally grounded, and collective approaches. So we can't talk about survivor well-being without talking about the systems shaping their safety. So being intentional about promoting well-being, safety, and stabilization requires, again, moving beyond individualism toward collective care. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Because we are all navigating some very difficult historical challenges, change can be very difficult, as you mentioned, Jacqueline, and challenging. And so my question to Patrice explores how we overcome setbacks in our own self-care. So, Raheen talked and Patrice spoke about doing small acts, interim pieces, measuring, but how do we come back? When we set that goal at the beginning of the year and on January 4th, we forget it. How do we come back?
Thanks for the question, Dr. Sims. So when I'm working with my clients, whether as a naturopathic doctor or an occupational therapist, I often use a technique that's known as motivational interviewing. And I do that at the beginning of goal setting. So with that, it's pretty unique in the way that you frame the question. So I will ask them, and these are things that people can ask themselves. On a scale of 1 to 10 or 0 to 10, with 10 being high, how confident are you that you can achieve this goal? And the next question you ask yourself is, how important is this goal? If the importance or confidence are less than 4 out of 10, then it's not the right time to even attempt the goal. So we would either need to revise it, or perhaps they need to engage in some pre-work to eventually get to the goal that they're trying to achieve. And the way that I frame that question is important to their success. So let's say that they have a viable goal. They tell me that they want to lose 25 pounds over the next 6 months. And I ask them the confidence and the importance, and they rate each at 5 out of 10. So we're above the 4 threshold. Now I will ask them, why is it a 5 and not a 0? And the reason I ask them that is because then they're going to focus on their successes. So maybe they tell me that 2 years ago they were able to lose weight, and it's just because of stress or time they haven't been able to sustain the gains. But now they're really committed. Maybe they're pre-diabetic or have hypertension. They have some other impetus that makes them want to achieve the goal in this time and space. But because they had previous success, they can reflect on and leverage the approaches that they used at that time to be successful. So that's why I asked them that question. If I asked it, why is it only a 5? Then they're going to focus on all the barriers, right? So I see my role as a therapist and as a clinician more broadly to help be a cheerleader and a champion, and also to help them to recognize that when they come to me, it's important for them to be honest with me if they didn't achieve the goal in the first place. So if, let's say, we have a follow-up, it's often like verbal diarrhea, I would say. They come and say, I didn't do anything that you suggested, right? I'm not there to judge them. I'm there to support them and help them to get where they want to go. So for me, it's all about collaboration, encouraging them to be kind, to exercise self-compassion. And I loved when Dr. Jacqueline Ben John already mentioned choosing yourself with wellness and kindness. That really resonated with me. And I'll give you just another example to build on that 25-pound weight loss goal. So let's say that that same person loves going to McDonald's and ordering a burger and large fries 3 times a week. So if they do that, I'm going to suggest that the next time they go, they also order a side salad or veggie sticks. I don't even know if they sell that at McDonald's anymore. I don't eat theirs, but just for example purposes. So that I'm not trying to get them to stop eating the burger and fries initially, but to add in something healthy. And then over time, the next time I follow up, if they've now integrated the salad, then I will say, okay, try ordering a small fry. Maybe try ordering a kid's, I don't know, I think it's the Happy Meal that has the kids burger, right? So then gradually we extinguish that. They've already built in the healthy habit. And then we start working to reduce the habits that we're trying to extinguish. And I say that because people don't like to feel deprived. People want to feel, in terms of success and sustainability, they need to feel like they're on the right track and they're making these gradual and incremental changes. So the outcome will be significantly improved if we do it that way. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Patrice. And to bring the topic closer to home for us, as high achieving women, I direct my next question to Alethea. So, Alethea, why do high achieving women often struggle silently with their mental health?
Great question. And I think it's well said, and we had already summarized that, women have this perception of wanting to be able to have it all and carry it all. And, society has also dictated that the strong woman um, syndrome is across board, that they need to make sure that they present, that they can hold things together, and that they look perfect. And part of that is at the expense of their own mental wellness. And what we are saying here to women is that, yeah, there's no need to carry all of these things. And the first thing is self-awareness. And when you realize that you are weighed down by all of those responsibilities, then the next step is to unpack it and process what works best for you. And just like everyone had mentioned here, the 8 types of self-care is on that path of wellness and developing a wellness plan that incorporates activities that help you with your dopamine increase and your serotonin enhancement. Those are the activities that you need to focus on to find your joy.
Thank you, Alethea. Your words resonated deeply with me, and flows nicely into the final question for this round. And so, Barb, can you share with us one or two research or programs that you've been a part of developing that supports the health and well-being of individuals at your institution?
Yeah, and I'd like to just add that we need to recognize that 1 in 4, and that number is probably lower, struggle with mental health. And within our Black community, we don't talk about mental health. So some of the research that I'm doing is trying to normalize that conversation about mental health and doing it earlier. So some of the work I do is even working with daycare teachers and daycare teachers who are working with young Black children as early as the age of 4. And we know that people begin to identify racism as soon as they're outside of their home and in a different environment, and they start to get treated differently very early. And then how do they process that? So one of the projects I'm working on is an early childhood education project and helping early childhood educators to teach from an Afrocentric perspective to make sure that we're centering the lived experience of our Black children at a very early stage. Because we know that self-identity, that self-love and self-confidence is so very important when it comes to mental health. I'm also part of a national project that looks at the Black child and youth and well-being with Dr. Bukola Salami. And that's really important because if we begin to put in place, and you've heard that from Alethea, the idea of the social terms of health, starting that early, looking at all the factors that impact our health and our well-being, and breaking that down early and making sure that we're developing a positive environment for our young people to thrive. And if our young people are thriving, we know that they're going to do well. We need to also recognize that a lot of that weight is on our Black women. And our Black women are the ones that are the caregivers, often are the ones who are taking care of the children from their medical appointments to their school appointments. So looking at how can we care for Black women is another research project that we're doing. At Dalhousie University, we're getting ready to launch, under the leadership of myself and Dr. Omisri Dryden, a Black Health Research Hub, where Black researchers can come together, collaborate, look at research from cradle to grave, because we know that a lot of us in Canada still depend on the US for statistics, where we have a very thriving and growing Black population here. And it's important for us to really begin to collect race based data, to use it in our research, and to really lay claim to our lived experience as people of African descent here in Canada and how our health is being impacted by colonization, by racism, by different structures that weren't built for us to thrive. And so our research looks at that and names what we're experiencing, what we're struggling with. And hopefully we'll see an increase in our a positive increase in our mental health through some of the research projects that I'm engaged in.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Barb. As we continue on this conversation, personally, I've been reflecting on how do we intentionally break the cycle. And so I'm hearing that. There are some of us who are doing the work in early childhood education. You're right. By age 2, racialized children know that they're being treated differently in childcare centers. I also think one of the greatest legacies we can leave is a commitment to good healthcare practices for the next generations and truly teaching them how to value and treasure themselves. So we enter the final round of questions, and the first goes to Patrice. So, Patrice, what personal self-care practices have you successfully implemented? If you could give us one or two, that would be great.
Thanks, Dr. Sims. So to build on what my colleagues have already said, Roheen mentioned the importance of setting boundaries and pausing to check in with our bodies. And Dr. Barb Hamilton Hinch already discussed the importance of saying no. So I'm also a recovering people pleaser, and I'm working on setting those boundaries. And I have heard it say that no is a full sentence. And also when you say no to others, you say yes to yourself. So those quotes really resonate with me, and I really try to keep them top of mind. As someone who's been on the verge of burnout multiple times in my career, I realized that I need to pour into myself and ensure that my own cup is full to have the emotional reserves to really be able to pour into others. And unfortunately, I learned that the hard way, but I know now that I can't fully deplete my own cup and use all of my resources to pour into others. My cup needs to be full, and I need to give the world the overflow. So that's a nuanced shift that really I've adopted, and it resonates with me. I can't run on fumes, and it's a reminder for me to put on my own life vest first, and that requires intentionality about it. So to give you some examples, when I started working from home, primarily almost 4 years ago, so I had transitioned from full-time in the clinical space to full-time in the equity, diversity, and inclusion and health equity spaces. But I really recognized the importance of building movement and physical activity into my workday. So if I'm not in meetings and my fitness watch gives me the little nudge at 10 to the hour, I'm in a townhouse, so I have lots of stairs and I walk up and down the stairs to get my 250 steps in for the hour. If I'm in a meeting but I'm not presenting, I'll go off camera and I'll march in place. I also am very intentional about going for a daily lunch walk on my work days, usually for at least half an hour. And years ago when I started that, I used to listen to music, but now actually I stopped that for the last 2 years or so. And what I do is I say positive affirmations instead to build myself up. I also do a body scan to just assess where I'm carrying stress in my body, often in the neck and shoulder area, which is very common. And I might also do some deep breathing or even hum, which you may or may not, it stimulates your vagus nerve, which is one of the cranial nerves. And that's part of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is it helps us to rest and digest and calms us down when we're stressed. And I will say at this point, my lunch walks have become really sacred and I don't like to miss them. I find that it helps me to reset my intentions for the afternoon, and I focus on just letting go of any stressors from the morning.
Thank you so very much.
Oh.
Thank you. The next question goes to Roheen. Roheen, what community support systems have been most sustaining for you? And how can individuals build those supports intentionally rather than only when they're already burnt out? So, how do we do the prevention, and how do we call on community to be a part of our wholeness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, thank you so much. And I just reminded Patrice, thank you so much for reminding me about the sacredness of walks. I'm going to now start to schedule those in. I appreciate you adding that layer. I think for me, in response to this in really beautiful question, Dr. Sims, it's coming back to really seeing community as an ecosystem. When we are in an ecosystem, we are going to be impacted in both positive and also sometimes negative ways by what people feed us in terms of their narratives, their insecurities, their fears, and so forth. And so to continue to see yourself as somebody who is part of an ecosystem. So I offer you three layers of your ecosystem as you think about your curation of your community. The first one is who in your circle or community can truly hold space for you and can help you come back to yourself. And sometimes that the response will surprise you. It may be somebody you never thought of, or it may be nobody. And then how do you bridge finding that person? The second are who can help you make really critical decisions, who can help you know how to navigate different areas, systems, your work environment, who can sponsor you. And these are your strategy people to really think about who can help you be strategic. And the third are your, what I call, our soul people. And they are different generations, right? Ancestrally, this could be somebody who's in much more of a sort of a senior leadership role or an area of wisdom, but it could also even be somebody young as well. For my niece, my 6-year-old niece, who always reminds me of just to have joy and fun, she is my soul person because she reminds me that I am human, I'm not a machine, and joy is just as much fuel as productivity is. And Barb, I appreciate you raising that as a critical, important piece for us to reflect on. Ultimately, what I want us to remember and remind ourselves about in being community is that for many of us, we've come from cultures, we've come from backgrounds where community was a source of sacred connection. And sometimes we can mistake that as being something that we have to do always. And I'm going to invite us to say, it's not something you have to do always, but it's something that you want to do. And so how do you move that into a level of agency and also into a consensual place? Because let's face it, there are some people in our communities who we might actually need to learn to let go and disconnect from. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. There have been some comments and some questions in the chat. And so I'm going to divert a bit and pose a question from Yvonne Sam. And she says, has the concept of Black health and Black mental wellness been fully grasped or understood by others, especially the mainstream culture? I just asked for one of the panelists to respond to that. It's from Yvonne Sam.
I don't mind just starting off. I will say that and this is just my opinion, which I'm owning, I do not think it's been fully grasped or understood by others in mainstream culture. However, I will say that there is work being done. I'm in Toronto and the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, so CAMH. They're doing a lot of work in this space. They have culturally responsive mental health services available. So I know that there is work happening and programs are being developed.
Thank you.
Can I just add a small thing really quickly to that? I'm part of the Black Health Education Collaborative, and I know that we've made it part of the Medical Council examination questions so that every medical doctor will now start to be asked questions in their medical exam on Black health. And I helped to develop that with a couple other Black researchers. And so that's amazing seeing that it's coming, but it's not there. And I think you're seeing an increase in Black mental health clinicians nationally. And I think COVID has opened the doors for many of us to offer those services even online. So if you can't find a Black mental health clinician, let's say in Nova Scotia, there's guaranteed to be one in Ontario that can do online. So you're beginning to see the growth and the importance, and that's spilling over into cultural competency and teaching other clinicians about Black mental health if we can't find a Black mental health clinician. So I think you're beginning to see that, particularly in Nova Scotia. We're being intentional in trying to make that part of our curriculum within our social work program, our counseling program, and our med school programs. But it's not where it should be, but it's not where it was.
Thank you, Evans. Sam, for that question, and thank you, Barb. And so, Barb, this question goes directly to you. How do you support your own mental, emotional, and physical well-being?
Hmm. Thanks for that question. I think that Patrice gave some great guidance in terms of what I should be doing or doing more of. In Nova Scotia, we have a great organization called Nova Scotia Sisterhood, which would be similar to the Taibu Health Center in Ontario. And the Nova Scotia Sisterhood brings women together to talk about health topics. It could be anything from PAPS to breast cancer to having a book club. And so they have been doing a number of programs monthly and sometimes weekly for Black women. I think many of us on this call probably have our own Black sister circles, and those circles do different things. Some are academic circles, some are community circles, and some are friends who just hold you when you're crying and when you need that hand, and you don't have to have any conversation. They just know what you need. And so I have a group of beautiful women that I meet with every Friday, once a month on a Friday. We don't let anything interrupt those days. And I think it's important to set aside that sacred time to be with your sisters, no matter what relationships we may be in, what parenting we may have responsibility for. Protect that time with your sisters. And people know that the last Friday every month, I'm gone to my sister's house and we're gathering and we're talking, and that's protected time. And that's really, really important. I'm also a person of faith. Spirituality and faith, and so I spend time in prayer, as I saw Patrice put in her note. And we have one great sister that's trying to encourage us to use more journaling. And I start, I stop, I start, I stop. But just being able to write down my thoughts when I do journal, it's freeing. It gives me a time to reflect. It gives me a time to appreciate who I am and what I've gone through that day and celebrate myself. So it's one thing to give gratitude to others, but it's important to give gratitude to ourselves for what we've been able to accomplish. And I spend time praising myself whenever I can.
Thank you, Barb. I certainly hope attendees are taking notes. These are some wonderful tips. Our final, well, next, the final question goes to Jacqueline. Um, Jackie, knowing what you know about wellness, trauma, and healing, what would you tell your younger self?
Thank you so much for that question. I would tell my younger self, you are not broken. You are coping. You are surviving. Your body remembers, and that's okay. Healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about reclaiming your body, your voice, and your connection to your ancestors and your spirit. Wellness isn't how you look on the outside. It's the moments of safety, rest, spiritual grounding, and the presence that you allow yourself to feel right now. Be present in your body, in your breath, but in your choices, even when the past feels heavy. But also allow yourself to imagine the future that you deserve, a life rooted in joy, dignity, cultural pride, and connection to your people and your community. We know in Canada, Black, Indigenous, and racialized women experience higher rates of sexual and systemic barriers to support. So your future self depends on the spaces that you create now that honor your whole being. And I would tell myself to remember Audre Lorde's words. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. And that's an act of political warfare. So choosing your safety, your rest, your joy, your spiritual and ancestral connection, and your vision for the future is not selfish, it's radical. So finally, I would tell her healing can be messy, but you are not alone in this. Some days will again be heavy, but some days light. Trust your rhythms, reclaim your body, listen to your ancestors, be fully present, and let your imagination carry you to the future you're building. Your survival, your wisdom, and your vision for what's next are already acts of resistance and power. You got this, girl.
Thank you so very much. I'm going to come back to Alethea. And so, Alethea, I'm wondering if you have a thought that you would like to share before we move forward.
Yeah, sure. I put it in the chat, but it was just so ironic that we had talked about what Black women and Black Indigenous women do to relieve stress, anxiety, and depression. And I'm currently funded by a U.S. university to look at that particular um, issue and concern. So if anyone's interested in reaching out, feel free to do that. And this is the thing that we need to focus on is that wellness plan. What are the activities that you are doing that helps release some of that tension and stress that you're carrying? And like Dr. Ben John said, that this is so important that we look to community because this is what women do. We heal amongst each other. So healing in community has always been something that we've done and we continue to do.
Thank you. Are there any other final words that you want to leave um, the folks online with?
I have just a couple quick thoughts.
Yeah, sure.
What I like to tell people and myself is that love and kindness and self-compassion is where it's at. So really be intentional about setting your mindset for the day, and also as I said, set the intention. Tell yourself today is the best day ever, right? So before you get out of bed, start off on a positive note. Thank you. There's always something to be thankful for.
Thank you so very much. Now, thank you all for such a rich and meaningful conversation on wellness beyond the surface. I think we have the making of a retreat for Black women on this topic. Donna, I hope you heard that. Please join me in thanking these brilliant and generous women, Roheen, Patrice, Alethea, Jacqueline, and Barb, for their unconditional sharing. I'm leaving with the conversation with several takeaways, but the piece that really speaks to me is the fact about setting boundaries. And it speaks to me because once you start setting boundaries, please note that there will be consequences. People don't like when you set boundaries. So be ready for that, and it's okay. It's about you. And the other one that I'd like, and thank you, Patrice, for reminding us about this, which is no is a full sentence, right? Thanks for that. And of course, creating a wellness plan. I am sure that you're all leaving with insights of your own. And certainly, I've noticed that some folks have shared in the chat, some people talk about prayer and other forms, being silent, embracing solitude. Awareness is important, but it's only the beginning. We must take concrete steps to care for ourselves because no one else can do that for us. I leave you with one word, Ubuntu, a reminder that as Black women, we need each other. I am because you are. God bless you all. Thank you.
Look how far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment. It's your time. You stood tall and now you see. Stand